诸法那愿的智慧生明了普愿在上悉消除是常行菩萨道。
This is homage to the mother of all the Buddhas, the perfection of wisdom, which is inconceivable, ineffable, inexpressible. The mantra of the Heart Sutra, Bodhi Swaha. The verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Alamkara by Maitreya. These verses of salutation from Lama Karika by Master Nagarjuna. So today, the Listened Wisdom organization from Taiwan and other Chinese people have come here for this teaching today. So they are the main audience for this teaching. The purpose that we are gathered here is to learn about how we can transform our minds based on the teaching of the Buddha. In today's world, Buddhism in general and Nalanda tradition in particular, which teach mainly about the workings of our mind and emotions or psychology, and also using logic and reason as opposed to mere faith, and learn how to counter our negative emotions, destructive emotions such as anger, jealousy, and so forth, which are harmful not only to your mind, but it also hampers your immune system, and your physical elements are always disturbed, as the medical doctors say these days. So it is very important for us to have peace of mind. So peace of mind means, first you should know what actually disturbs your peace of mind. And by knowing that, then you need to know what are the measures to counter that. Just as you take medicine to counter your disease and sickness, knowing which kind of virus or bacteria has actually harmed you, and accordingly taking the medicine. as we also deal with the cold and heat accordingly, whichever is necessary. And so, just as in the external element, the things work, there are things which counter the negative ones. Likewise, internally, we should know then what are those factors which cause us disturbance in our mind, and know what are those factors which actually counter them. We should know what reason there is if we become angry. Why should we become angry? You may be angry at somebody and become like an enemy with each other, but then another day that may change and you can become friends. So if you receive criticisms from others, and if you actually react, it will not go away. It will become worse. Whereas if you actually show patience and cultivate compassion and love towards the perpetrator or the opponent who is trying to provoke anger, then you will be able to keep calm, and eventually this so-called enemy might become your friend. And therefore, if you think carefully, anger, arrogance, and jealousy not only disturb our peace of mind, but people who are friends also turn out to be enemies. And physically you also suffer, your health suffers. And therefore, it is very important to have peace of mind. We are not talking about religion as such, but since we all want happiness and do not want suffering, within happiness and suffering, there are those of the physical ones and the mental ones. And the mental ones are more important. And therefore, it's very important to develop and cultivate peace of mind. So not only Buddhism, but all religions of the world teach love and compassion, don't they? Why do they teach this? Because these religions are all related to human society. And since in human society, love and compassion are the most important things, even the scientists today say that we as social animals, as to use an English term, for one's own survival and individual survival, you have to rely on the community that you live in. And therefore, right from your birth, since you are within the social, you are a part of the social animal. Therefore, if you have people, if you are surrounded by people who are loving and compassionate, smiling at you, then you will live better. If a child is taken care of by his or her mother with compassion, love, then the child will also grow to be loving and so forth. So, when you die, if you are surrounded by loving friends, you will also die very peacefully. At the time of death, however great power or wealth and so forth you may have, that will not comfort you. And so, right from the beginning of our life, right at the beginning of our life and at the end of our life, love and compassion are beneficial and relevant in our life, since we are beings living in communities. So in the past, of course, people lived in a very small circle of family, and surrounded by family, friends. But today, since life has become quite hectic, we live in hustle and bustle. If you think about the world at large, Asia is dependent on the West, and the West is dependent on Asia, and similarly, North and South are dependent on one another. So the 7 billion people on this earth, we are one family, human family. So each individual's life, whether happy or not, whether we have a happy life or not, we are also dependent on the rest of the 7 billion people on this earth. So we need oneness, sense of oneness of entire humanity. Therefore, we need this recognition. It's very important. So, of course, we can train our mind to help other animals. We can do what we can, but since they do not have the language that we have, there's not much we can do for them. We, as Buddhists, talk about bringing happiness and peace to all mother sentient beings. But the 7 billion people on this earth, since we have different languages, we can communicate with others, each other. And so in practical terms, of course, we cannot do much to the rest of sentient beings, but the 7 billion people on this earth, since we are part of it, the 7 billion people on this earth, we have the opportunity to serve others as best as we can. And therefore, with this marvelous human brain, if it becomes a servant of, a slave of destructive emotions, then it doesn't serve much purpose. Whereas if you can use this intelligence, to cultivate and promote love and compassion, you will have real, true happiness. For example, it is quite clear that with bodhicitta, this highest form of altruistic spirit of enlightenment, regarding which Master Shantideva says that today I call upon all sentient beings to the feast of the temporary happiness and ultimately that of Tathagatahood or the Buddhahood, and therefore may all men and non-humans, may all humans and non-humans be joyous. And so if you can actually cultivate this spirit of enlightenment, this altruistic spirit of enlightenment, everyone will actually appear to be your friends and positive, rather than seeing them as negative ones. Otherwise, if you think of the other beings, such as those evil beings and so forth, so-called evil beings and so forth, and try to overcome them through rituals, that doesn't really help. And therefore, thinking of all sentient beings as your friends, I mean, if you are able to train your mind, you'll be for bodhicitta, then you will be able to see everyone as positive. If you think only of yourself being selfish alone, then the entire world will actually appear as enemies or adversaries to you. So it is very important to cultivate this altruistic intention by using this kind of human intelligence that we have. So this is not there in other animals, this kind of intelligence. So in our texts, we find mention of this kind of human life as being precious and also being difficult to obtain. And so in this kind of human life, we can actually achieve aims of oneself and others. And we should think of that and also use this life to serve others as best as one can. Of course, we can think about Buddhahood, but in practical terms, I mean, you should think of serving others. If you can do that with this altruistic mind or thought, you will see everyone as your friends. So in this world, all religions teach altruism, good heart or warm heart. So to have this, to cultivate this experience of warm heart, and there are different philosophical approaches that are used in different religious traditions, such as those of theistic religions, teach that everything is created by God, such as Christianity, Judaism, Islam, and others. They talk about the Creator God, and that Creator God is seen as someone full of love and compassion. So, based on such understanding of God being full of love, all the creatures like us are seen as children of the same God. So we are brothers and sisters from that point of view, from the theistic religious point of view. So someone who follows this kind of theistic religion sincerely, there's no way they could think about killing other human beings. But if you actually pay only lip service to the religion that you profess to belong to, then, of course, things like what has happened in the West in the 20th century, the First and Second World Wars and so forth, could happen. And so, during those wars, it is said that in the 20th century, due to war, it is said some historians say that there over 200 million people were killed. So this is something unimaginable. And then with regard to religious traditions of India, the first philosophical school was Sankhya school, within which there is one section which did not believe in a creator God. So, and also Buddhism and Jainism teach that there is no creator God, but whether you have happiness or sorrow is in your hands. So the non-theistic religions teach that we create the karmas or commit the actions that bring about either suffering or happiness. And therefore there's the practice of non-violence also taught. So in Jainism, there is this strong teaching on non-violence. And then after Jainism came Buddhism. So the Buddha also followed the path that has the teachings that were already there regarding non-violence and practice of non-violence. And from the philosophical point of view, Buddhism has a very profound teaching, and particularly in Nalanda tradition, there is so much emphasis on reason and logic. in the study of the teaching of the Buddha. And within the teaching of the Buddha, there's a Pali tradition, on the one hand, which is followed in Thailand, Burma, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, Laos. And Pali tradition was taught publicly by the Buddha, and these teachings were later written down and compiled into books. And so Pali tradition is the basis, the foundation of Buddhism. And then later, when the Nalanda tradition evolved, the Nalanda monastic institution evolved, the teachings of the Buddha were mostly written in Sanskrit. And so Sanskrit was used as a scholarly language, and perhaps Pali was more of a common people's language in those days. So Nalanda Monastic University became a center for learning, and Sanskrit was used, and the texts were, on Buddhism and logic and so forth were written in Sanskrit, and people studied Buddhism through this language. So sometimes we tend to use the terms Mahayana, Hinayana. I do not like that. Of course, this is mentioned in Sutra Alamkara by Maitreya, but when we use the terms Mahayana or Hinayana, we should not have a sense of discrimination against the others. In any case, I find it better to use the terms Sanskrit and Pali and Sanskrit tradition of Buddhism. So both teach the philosophical view of selflessness, and in the Pali tradition, the followers of Pali tradition in Theravada countries, there's a very good practice of monastic discipline. And the monks practice humility and moderation in their livelihood, which are very good. But in Pali tradition, they don't use much of logic. They mostly resort to scriptural citations, authority, whereas in the Sanskrit tradition, on the basis of, while we have the basis of the teaching of the Buddha, the basic teaching of the Buddha, when it's studied, there is this emphasis, emphasis on logic and reasoning to study Buddhism. For example, Master Diknaga and Dharmakirti have written books on logic and epistemology. So, logic and reasoning, epistemology, is considered very important in the Nalanda tradition of Buddhism. So when we use logic, what we do is investigate into the teaching of the Buddha without actually taking the teaching for granted. And so, in this the Sanskrit tradition, there is differentiation within the teaching of the Buddha into those which can be taken literally and those that cannot be taken literally. And so, because If if the teachings go against reason, then they cannot be taken literally. And to take it to a higher level, the definitive teachings are those which explicitly teach that of the ultimate reality, and then the sutras or the teaching of the Buddha, which explicitly teach the conventional truth, are considered those of the provisional or interpretable teachings. And so this kind of differentiation within the teaching of the Buddha is based on the Buddha's own statement, where he says, "O monks and scholars, just as gold is tested by rubbing, cutting, and burning, likewise you should examine my teaching, investigate and experiment my teaching, and then accept it, not because you have faith or devotion in me." And so, accordingly, Master Nagarjuna and his disciples have actually put the teaching of the Buddha to the test of reasoning and made the differentiated the teaching into divided the teaching into those of the definitive ones and the interpretable ones. And so in this tradition, you need to investigate, critically analyze the teaching, and then experiment it, whether the teaching actually accords with reality and with experience or not. And therefore, it is very similar to scientific thinking. So in today's world, of course, science, modern science, is more the purview of the investigation, more or less is limited to material things. Whereas in Buddhism, we do talk, they don't really talk about the slightly hidden phenomena or extremely hidden phenomena, but they are more or less dealing with what are obvious or manifest phenomena. Whereas in Buddhism, we do actually make this kind of division into within the objects of knowledge into the manifest objects, the slightly hidden and the extremely hidden. So in the last over 40 years of my discussion with modern scientists, I've found that we actually have benefited mutually, and there's been mutual learning between us. So in other words, this Nalanda tradition is based on logic and reasoning to explain the teaching and the reality of things. So of course I do respect all religious traditions of the world. Of the 7 billion people on this earth, all these different religious traditions, many people follow them. So they are actually finding the respective religions beneficial. So there are very good people in Christianity, Islam, Jainism, Judaism, and so forth. We can actually see this kind of positive impact of the respective religions on their followers. So therefore, there's every reason to respect all religions. Whereas when we talk philosophically, Buddhism, and particularly Nalanda tradition, is the most profound tradition. So as I said before, Pali tradition is the foundation of the teaching of the Buddha, and additionally we have the teachings of the Sanskrit tradition, which uses logic to prove the truth of the teaching of the Buddha. So I sometimes jokingly tell the Thai monks followers of the Thai Buddhist tradition. So without, if you lack this, the use of logic, which is in the Nalanda tradition, it would be like an old person without teeth trying to chew on something hard, which is difficult for the person. Whereas if you have logic and reason, then you can actually chew on that hard object or the thing, which is the Nalanda tradition. So someone who has studied logic will actually just question, why did the Buddha say this? Not saying that, oh, this must be so because the Buddha said so. So we do not become yes ministers. So there's always questions raised when you hear about some teaching of the Buddha in this tradition. So there are many religious traditions in the world today, and from amongst the 7 billion people on this earth, about 1 billion do not have any belief in religion. So if you divide the 7 billion people, there are those who do not have religion, who do not believe in religion. And then there are those who criticize religion. And then there are those who follow certain religion. But all are equal in wanting happiness, not suffering. So those who criticize religion or non-believers, when they are actually tossed by negative emotions like anger and so forth, and if you compare them with those who believe in religion and see who has more peace of mind, I think if you check well, then those who follow some religion may have better peace of mind. So of course, in the 20th century, there has been so much advancement materially, but that alone cannot bring peace of mind. So highly advanced materially, highly advanced people, living in society, are full of anger, jealousy, and so forth. So individually they are not happy, and as a community also people don't live happily. So if you look at the world today, in the school system, we have been talking about how to introduce this study of mind, emotions, so as to bring about peace of mind, disciplined mind. So I've been urging people to include this in their school curriculum from kindergarten level. In the curriculum, we need to have, of course, we do teach children how to keep and maintain physical health. And similarly, I've been saying that we need to include hygiene of emotions, also need to be included in the school curriculum. So I have such a view, and I've been expressing this to others, that there is such a need in the world. So I just have this thought now. If a child is given some gift, a candy or something, with a very serious face, if someone gives some gift with a serious face, and if another person actually without any gifts shows smile, the child will actually prefer the smile and not the gift. So I usually say that those who are not able to respond to something good done to them, they are like mosquitoes. I usually say that mosquitoes, when I am happy, I actually try to give blood to mosquitoes. And then after sucking some blood and their body becomes all red, and then they fly away. So there's no sense of appreciation from the mosquito. Whereas other animals like cats and dogs do appreciate your kindness. And so all religions, since they teach religion, we should and we must respect all religious traditions. And today, the religions which are supposed to teach love and compassion cause division amongst people, saying this is my religion, that is their religion. And so it is very important to have harmony amongst the religious traditions. So in India, for over 1,000 years now, all the major religious traditions of the world coexist in India. So India has a very good religious harmony. So it should be promoted further within India. Not only preserve the religious harmony within the country itself, but we should also share it with the rest of the world, because there are people who use, in the name of religion, kill other people. Look at Afghanistan. The people follow the same religion, Islam, but within Islam they actually have this division of Sunni and Shia. And then in other countries also there are such divisions, and in Burma Buddhists also have bullied Muslims. So India should show the example of religious harmony to the rest of the world. Did you have your tea? So just because you have different names of the different religions, of course there have been fightings amongst the people following the religions in the past, but even today, because of the difference in the religious names and religions, if you fight and kill each other, it is very unfortunate. So, of course, with regard to faith, one should have faith in one's own religion, whereas one should respect all other religions. So, since we have, in Buddhism, there is a very profound philosophical understanding of things. We are not thinking of actually spreading religion, but we should actually think of how much contribution we can make to the world to help others. And so, the psychology and logic and epistemology that are found in Buddhist texts, of course, the source is Buddhist literature, but we can use these subjects as academic subjects, not religious. And so, study of mind, emotion, psychology, and also logic and epistemology should be considered as academic subjects. So, from amongst the over 300 volumes of Gangyur and Tengyur, the translated words of the Buddha and their exegetical treatises, we have actually compiled books which comprise the subjects of science and philosophy. So I have been saying that we can actually divide the whole content of Gangyur and Tengyur into three parts: science, as found in the Buddhist literature, and philosophy, and then religion, Buddhism. So we have compiled the books on science and in Tibetan, and there are translations into Chinese and other languages, English and so forth. And then the second part, which is philosophy, where the books on philosophy will come out soon. So whichever religion you may be following, psychology, logic and epistemology, and philosophy are very useful to learn. And so, with regard to philosophy, in Buddhism, there's teaching on selflessness, within which there is the selflessness of persons and phenomena. And then within the Madhyamakas, there are those of philosophical schools which assert mind on the non-duality of subject and object. And then the Madhyamakas who accept the externality of things as well. So when your whole philosophical system is based on the idea that there must be something essential within each and everything, then you try to actually pinpoint at something being this and that. And since this cannot be found, therefore the Chittamatras, the mind-only school, assert that that there is no external phenomena. It's only, everything is the reflection of your mind, and therefore they talk about the non-duality of the non-dual emptiness. Whereas those Madhyamakas which do not assert any kind of essential existence in things, they say that, of course, by saying, as the Chittamatras say, that things are merely reflection of your mind, but the Madhyamakas who reject any form of inherent existence in things, for them, nothing whatever exists independently, but everything is merely designated. So in the Heart Sutra, when Shariputra asked Avalokiteshvara, how should a noble son or daughter train, and so forth, Avalokiteshvara says that such a person must see everything as having no inherent existence. And Avalokiteshvara goes on to say that form is empty and emptiness form and so forth. So what that means is that although when we look at things, they do appear as if they have some kind of independent, solid existence, yet they do not have such an existence, and which is very similar to what the quantum physics says. So, form does not exist the way it appears to you, and therefore form is empty. But this is not nothingness, not nihilism, not saying that form does not exist, but form and others, which actually have influence and affect us. Since they do not have independent existence, they are merely designated by our conception. So since they do affect us, form and others, whereas they cannot be found as having any independent objective existence, therefore their existence shows that their existence is dependent on other factors. And therefore, through the coming together of causes and conditions, form and so forth come into being. And therefore, the form and so forth, which have no inherent existence, are merely designated by our conception and labels, language. So the emptiness of form and so forth, and the form and so forth, they are said to be of same nature or essence. So on the one hand, when we actually critically analyze the form and so forth, we actually come to understand that they are empty of inherent existence, which is the ultimate reality or truth. And whereas when we do not do any kind of critical analysis into their nature, we still can conventionally accept them. Therefore, there is this conventional truth of form and so forth. And therefore, the Heart Sutra says, form is not other than emptiness, and emptiness is not other than form, and form too is not other than emptiness, which shows that they are of the same essence, but distinct conceptually. So, of course, with regard to mind, we can think of mind as, in terms of series of moments. Moments of consciousness. So both the Chittamatras and Madhyamakas both say that things, external things as well as mind, have no but we cannot actually find them when we actually try to search for their identity. So although things cannot be found when you do the sevenfold analysis into them, yet Master Chandrakirti in his Madhyamaka Avatara says that there is a way of existence of things, which is to say that things do exist by way of worldly convention. So in Mula Madhyamaka Karika, the fundamental verses of the Middle Way treatise by Master Nagarjuna, teaches how we are brought into this kind of unenlightened life in samsara. In the 26th chapter, and then the chapter 18 of that text teaches that of selflessness, and then chapter 24 deals with the Four Noble Truths, and it says that eliminating karma and delusions, there is liberation. Karma and delusions arise through our exaggerated outlook, and that in turn is rooted in elaboration or fabrication, which can be ended by emptiness. And so things that arise through dependence are said to be empty, and that is said to be designated, that is middle way. Whatever phenomena, since there's no phenomena which is not dependent, there is no phenomena which is not empty. And so these are taught in chapter 24, which is a very important, and this Mula Madhyamaka Karika is a very important text that we should study. And so, as an explanation of the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, we have the Buddha Palita commentary by Buddha Palita and Master Chandrakirti's Prasana Pada, or clear words, and Madhyamaka Avatara, entering into the middle way. So you can actually see that you can feel convinced through these teachings, these texts, that there's no other way that the Buddha's teaching can be interpreted other than this. And then there are commentaries on Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Master Tsongkhapa, and Master Tsongkhapa himself studied the classic texts a lot. And at one point he had a vision of Manjushri, the wisdom Buddha. And with regard to Madhyamaka philosophical view, Manjushri gave him some instructions, and Master Tsongkhapa said he found that very difficult to comprehend. And then Manjushri told him that Tsongkhapa still must engage in further study and practice. And so we should not think of receiving some kind of blessing as something solid right away by doing some practice on the deity. And therefore, Master Tsongkhapa underwent a process of purification and further practice and study of the teaching. And then at one point, when he was reading the Buddha Palita commentary, and he came to the point where it says that a person is not different from the aggregates and so forth. At that point, reading Buddha Palita commentary, he was said to have gained true insight into selflessness or emptiness. And so, Tsongkhapa actually went through the process of studying very extensively, and then after that, following the instruction of Manjushri, he went into practice, to practice in the mountains and so forth, and then finally was able to gain insight into emptiness. And so it took time for him to gain emptiness, insight into emptiness. And then the practice and the cultivation of bodhicitta also is very important. So when I once visited Singapore, I met with some Chinese monks, and they recited the Heart Sutra in Chinese, and I felt very sad at that time, reflecting on how much there had been this kind of tradition of reciting the Heart Sutra in China in the past, in these monasteries, and now that it has declined in China. So the 1,000-year tradition that has taken root in China cannot be obliterated right away, easily. So some years ago, one university in Beijing actually did a survey of Buddhist population in China, and they found that there were 300 million Chinese Buddhists, and many of them were they found to be intellectuals, educated people. And then, of course, the number of Chinese Buddhists is increasing. I've heard that there's some Chinese quantum physicists in mainland China have actually found that when they are really fully convinced about what the quantum physics says, that there's no objective existence in things, then their reaction to things, good and bad, are not so strong. And there's no kind of a grasping at some kind of solidity in things. So Master Nagarjuna says that our attachment, anger, and confusion arise through some kind of exaggeration. And when we see things which are good or bad, beautiful or ugly, we have this sense of the beauty or the ugliness as if they exist objectively. So today in China, the people taking interest in Buddhism seems to be increasing in number. So you, the people from Taiwan, you have the tradition that had spread in China, although in mainland China this tradition has declined. So since you have a 1,000-year-old tradition, it's not easy to go away. So whenever I meet Chinese people from mainland China, I always tell them that they must study Buddhism. You always say Amitopo, Amitopo. Of course, you have faith in the teaching. Just by saying Amitopo, Amitopo, reciting the name of Amitabha hundreds or thousands of times will not bring you realization of the teaching. So you must study, I tell them. And also reciting Om Mani Padme Hum, the six-syllable mantra of Avalokiteshvara, will not bring realization within you. And if you recite the Om Mani Padme Hum faster and faster, you come to say money, money, money. So when I give gifts of a statue of a Buddha to others, to the Chinese people, I tell them that Buddha is our teacher, and therefore we must study his teaching. So Buddhism was already translated, teachings of the Buddha were already translated into Chinese before it was translated into Tibetan. So with regards to the seniority amongst the followers of the Buddhism, we have the Theravada Pali tradition followers as the most senior-most students, and then Tangsan Lama or Xuanzang came to Nalanda and he studied Buddhism there. And it is said that he even met with Naga Bodhi, who was a student of the Master Nagarjuna. So whatever the case, he came to Nalanda and studied, and then brought Buddhism and brought it to China. And then in the 7th century, Buddhism initially came to Tibet. So in any case, we are this follower of the same tradition, the Nalanda tradition. So in the Chinese, there are no translations. There were no translations of Dignaga and Dharmakirti's text, except for one text by Master Dignaga, which is called The Door of Logic. So if you don't have the translation of these texts on logic and epistemology, you should translate them. And then with regard to Master Dharmakirti's Pramana Vartika Karika, of course there is translation in Tibetan, which is a very important text. And then there are many commentaries also written by Indians and Tibetan scholars on this. So in Taiwan, of course, you have kept your tradition well, and you have taken much interest in studying Buddhism, and this must be continued. So we have in this gathering people from different countries. As I said before, psychology and logic, epistemology. Although you may be a follower of Jesus Christ or Allah, but these subjects, if you study them, and particularly if you could study about altruistic mind of bodhicitta, I mean, it would be very beneficial to you. So many people having interest in the teaching of the Buddha have gathered here from different parts of the world today. So the essential message of all religious tradition is to have a good heart, warm heart. And in Buddhism teaches the techniques to transform one's mind and to cultivate the altruistic heart. It's almost 10:30. So the teaching, the discourse that we are going to have is on Master Nagarjuna's Ratnavali, Precious Garland, and I thought to do the first chapter may be good. So in this there's teaching pertaining to higher status or higher rebirth and the means to obtain or gaining higher status, and then the highest good. So in order to reach the aim of highest good, it is important to have a good human life, and therefore this chapter teaches the different means that you should cultivate to have a higher rebirth, on the basis of which how to develop the wisdom, the analytical mind, investigating into the reality of things, which can actually bring real transformation within one's mind. And this transformation of your mind cannot happen within few days or few weeks or few months, but if you keep persisting in the practice, I mean, of course, after years and decades, you'll see some transformation within yourself, and therefore, in order to have that kind of meditative experience, you need to have actually done reflection on the teaching and gain conviction in the teaching. And for that, you need to actually hear the teaching or study it. Merely hearing some teaching may not give you the experience. You may hear something today, and the next day you may learn something else. And therefore, as Master Tsongkhapa says, may I be able to bring a decisive understanding through the reflection and using analytical meditation. So when we talk about emptiness, we are actually talking about how things are, the reality or the truth of things. And therefore, we can actually use what are known as the four principles or reasonings, so which are used to actually gain, to delve into the final reality of things. And so whatever you have heard and studied, you should reflect on that over and over again, so that you gain conviction in the points that you have considered. So through that, you will bring about experience within yourself, and that actually transforms you. So I have friends who have gone through this process, the threefold process of learning or hearing, reflecting on the teaching, and then meditation. So perhaps I should stop here for today. So of course there will be some review. Today, Yangdin Rinpoche will do the review session, lead the review session. So tomorrow also I will teach for about 1.5 hours, and we'll have a break after that. As an old monk of 84, I will take some rest. So that's all. So during the revision session, bring up questions. You should consider it as if you are having some class, not receiving some kind of instruction from a Lama, but ask your questions to clarify your doubts. So, these are dedication verses. Just as brave Manjushri and Samandabhatra realize things as they are, also I dedicate all these merits in the best way, that I may follow their perfect example. I dedicate all these roots of virtue with the dedication praised as the best by the victorious ones thus gone to the three times, so that I might perform the noble bodhisattva deeds in